Hello guys and welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into the infamous Armored Stryker deck. Now this is a deck that when I first started playing it, I had the mindset that I was going to be very aggressive, hyper focused on pushing, and I basically built my deck completely around that mentality. I thought I would have early recon to assess what the enemy was going to bring, and then build a very strong early tank ball and run right through the enemy's line. The playstyle mindset from the Stryker and USMC battle group, which did have a very punch through and kind of go as far as you can, get to the enemy AA, get to their arty, use some kind of a medium tank. Because you know what? I'm telling you, the Booker's is a medium tank. I don't care what y'all say. It ain't no light tank. Anyway, so I was playing this deck very much in that fashion. So I built it completely around that. And this deck you're looking at right now, the Ground Armor Push, was my first kind of brushstroke towards building a deck with that play style. Now, as you might know, or as you might have guessed, this deck, I ended up kind of hating that. Initially it was fun, because it was very aggro, it was very weighty, very punchy. You know, every battle was kind of to the death. Because obviously when you bring out a 350 point tank, that's a huge part of your economy. About 25 points worth of your income. So you don't get to bring a lot of those out. So every single one counts. You don't want to lose any. And I did end up feeling like if my ground push ever lost its steam or momentum, I was just left with nothing. And that was really hard to deal with. So what I ended up actually changing, and the deck we're going to review today, is my Ground Armor Steel Wall. I ended up changing this deck to play more like a defensive line, where I'm using my infantry to best effect, and I'm bringing my vehicles in phase one to primarily create this kind of iron wall, where I get to an objective, because again, with this armor deck, you're very slow. You have no helicopters at all whatsoever, and even your air tab is not very extensive. And we'll go over all that. But my steel wall is really there to hold back any enemy attacks. I know in the last video I said Stryker and USMC, you can create a defensive wall that enemies kind of crash against. But this takes that to a whole new degree and level. I mean, this as a defensive frontline deck, which is exactly how I'm going to classify this. This is a defensive frontline deck that has absolute phase 2 and phase 3 power spikes, because phase 1, your whole goal is just understand what they're bringing against you and what you're going to be dealing with, and then start to set up a counter for that. So when I'm looking at this deck, I am totally thinking of it as a defensive front line, and everything I built towards it kind of gets into that place. Now let's start with Recon. Alright, so I bring 4 scouts and Stryker RVs with the Javelin and trophy system. Again, my kind of play style and mentality with scouts is that because they are a 6-man team, although they only have 6 armor, they can have a little bit of a combat potential versus, for example, a cavalry scout, who I don't think there's an infantry squad that a cavalry scout beats in head-to-head combat. I think literally the only reason why you bring a cavalry scout is because it has a javelin, and you use it as kind of an open field, assisting your tanks with pushes, because one of the good uses of it is you can get into a high rise. It has a javelin, even though it only has 3 missile shots, but you can combine that with other elements around you, right? And kind of be able to leverage those APS attacks. So the Scout, again, I primarily bring it because it has the Javelin, but I also bring it because it does have some potential to fight back against something. If it actually does get spotted, it has an AT4, so if something like a BTR-90 rolls up on it and spots it, there is a chance that it'll actually be able to fight back and destroy it. But again, we're going to primarily be using this with the Stryker RVs. Now, one thing I'll kind of go over at the beginning of this video is when you're looking at setting up a deck like this that has a lot of, cannon firepower, and then on the side it also has, it has ATGMs and tow missiles. Those are two different kinds of attacks that you have to pair together. So, for example, if you have, let's say, a SEP V3 trophy and a SEP V2 or maybe an Abrams, let's say you have them all together, well, those are all a direct fire cannon attacks that have no interaction with APS. So if you bring a Stryker RV, at the very beginning of the game, you're really not doing anything if you're also only having SEP V3 trophies. So you kind of have to think about your armored attack as I gotta pair everything together. So you would not want to put a SEP V3 trophy with something that has a javelin missile or a tow missile, because the tow missile is never going to get through, the javelin's never going to get through until it eats all of its APS, and that TTK is so long because you have to get through 2 or 4 APS charges that the tank basically was on his own the whole time. Same with the javelin. If the javelin is there on its own, it's not really accomplishing much. So when I look at this, I actually try to pair the Stryker javelin with the Cav Scout, because at least then these two guys, one of their javelins will get through. They're shooting about the same time. Or I'll pair the Stryker RV javelin with something like the M901A3 and the battleship, right? So I try to think about it like that, or the I always forget the name of this thing, AMPV, or the AMPV. I try to bring these guys together because that way they're all firing that volley, and again, one of them is going to get through. Two of them, again, the more of them you bring together, the more likelihood one of these attacks is actually going to break through the APS and get some damage. So my opener with this deck, and the scout teams that I use, again, is primarily looking at just wanting to get vision and wanting to understand what my enemy is bringing against me. Again, this scouting and recon tab for this deck is not the greatest, but it's very effective. The RQ shadow does allow you to see if there's sneaky recon trying to get around your flanks. You keep it low, you keep it way back, and it very easily can find any scouts that are trying to get through your lines. Predator. So this guy, I originally changed this to have the Griffin HE missiles, because the way I've been using it is a very much backline, kill something that snuck through type of drone. But unfortunately, I realized that these Griffin missiles, even though you're getting 2 of them, they are far less effective than the Hellfires. The Hellfires, with the amount of damage they have, they will kill an infantry in 1 hit. The Griffins will not. They will usually takes 2 missiles to kill the target. So at that point, you're paying 10 points more for getting 2 of these, and you're really getting the same effectiveness. So I kind of realized it's better to have 2 Hellfires and be able to one-shot whatever you're hitting from the top attack, than trying to go with the Griffin, and you end up using the same, you end up getting the same amount of kills with twice the missiles. So I like this with just the Hellfire, and again, I have 2 of them to cover the back line. Unfortunately, Predators never make it out very far because they get spotted and they get blown up. The Guardian, again, I haven't really changed this much. I love to still use it for a backline scout. I get it all the way around the sides of the map, especially if I notice an enemy is abusing a lot of arty and a lot of, has a lot of AA. I will just take both of them, go around the side of the map, and then just try to dive in to get those arty and AA kills. So the M981 Fist, this thing is very interesting. It's kind of one of those meme units that you're like, why would you ever bring this thing? But as I'm playing Broken Arrow more and more, I am really appreciating this 2400 optic scout range, and the fact that this thing does have a little bit of stealth does mean that it is harder for it to get spotted. And again, it's only 60. It doesn't cost very much, and it can laze. Another thing I'm trying to get more proficient in is actually lasing targets for my team. And now also for myself, because of the range of arty that you have with this deck, you get a ton of guided arty options. So having these and practicing using them is actually very important. You can put this thing up on a ridge somewhere and put it in forest, so it's getting the cover bonus, and it will be able to spot amazingly well. And then again, it can laze anything that it spots, and now all of a sudden you have homing munitions. So very good option to bring. Again, it's not the most intuitive recon piece to use, but I definitely value it. So if I don't want to spend the points for the Stryker RV as a kind of a mobile recon unit, I'll bring the Fist V. And then Cav Scouts. So my primary role for Cav Scouts is if I am moving into an open field type of scenario where I'm also bringing in my other ATGM kind of platforms. So this is going to be kind of adding on to that ATGM combined attack. And yes, mostly all of my recon is always on hold fire. But when I am going to try to dump a volley at a tank or a couple tanks, I will turn these guys off and have them shoot, hoping that the enemy won't notice where this one rocket came from, because he's focusing on all the other kind of projectiles flying at him. So I love this. It's a basic kind of scouting deck. At the beginning of the match, I'll probably have 2 scouts or 2 Cav Scouts with either a Stryker RV, or I'll just actually bring stuff in my Infantry tab. Again, depends on the map. If it's more urban, I might just bring 2 Scouts on the flanks, and if it's an open field, I'll bring 2 Cav Scouts and spread them out. Alright guys, Editor Jack here, just realizing that I went to the Infantry tab without talking about the units I didn't bring. And technically, there's only like 2, maybe 3. So let's jump right in and review those units real quick. So I'll start out with the Bradleys. I do go into this a little bit later, but the Bradleys, I don't bring, these specific Recon Bradleys, because my goal for Recon is to have them spread out. And like I kind of discussed, you really need volley fire with the Bradley's tow missiles to get them to be effective. If you're just shooting one out and it's not hitting the target because it's getting encountered by, or it's being intercepted by APS, then this thing is actually probably going to be killed by whatever it's shooting at while trying to destroy it with the TOW 2A. Now you could bring this with a Cav Scout and pair them together, but then of course you're going to want to add the armor and the jammer. And I just haven't, I had a couple of games where I brought these, of course you can also go with this one that gives it a much more beefy package. It costs a lot more, and pairing this with the Cav Scout does allow you to have this top attack missile and the Cav Scout with a lot of damage. And honestly, there could be a place for it there, but again, this is a very fragile combo. If you're getting rushed by, or if you happen to find, 2 or 3 tanks in a column, sure, one of these might get through. The other likelihood is that he's going to catch it, he's going to smoke, he's going to back up, and he's going to hit you with something like a bomb, right? My goal for the Recon portion of this deck, because as you see, I'm also pretty maxed out on the money. Of course, I could adjust. I could take some of the Stryker RVs out. But my goal is to create a wide net of Recon. And the main thing for me that I wouldn't bring this is because it doesn't have the laser, right? So the nice thing I like about the Stryker RV Javelin with a Cav Scout is that I get the laser from the RV because I'm trying to laze more. Right, I can put this thing on hold fire, I can have the laser, and I can still have the Cav Scout. So now I have 2 forms of Javelin if I would need to use it, and I get the laser from the Stryker RV. So that's why I don't really bring the Bradleys. I just don't see them as being powerful enough on their own to be worth the cost that they have. So let's now talk about the B-Fist. This, you could say, does have a laser on it, and you can give it, the nice armor package. You can give it the Iron Fist protection and the extra optic with the faster engine. And now all of a sudden, this is a very kind of stocky Recon unit that has a laser but there's no tow missile. So this thing can't fight against anything. And even if it's shooting at something like a Jeep or an infantry unit, the DPS on just the Bushmaster is really low. It's not even a Bushmaster 2, which I believe is what the, yes, AMPV gets, right? So I have kind of not enjoyed what the Bradleys bring to the table, again, for their cost. If I want a laser, I have this thing as a sight tool with a laser. If I want something with some damage and a laser, I have this with the Cav Scout. But please test it out. If you find this thing is giving you some kind of use case that I'm not seeing or I'm not realizing, please let me know, right? Again, I like to be as cost effective as possible. So if I just want some far scouting with a laser, I have that. If I want to be able to ambush a target, I have this with the Cav Scout, right? For kind of a like a 1-2 punch. So the other unit in this tab is the M1A2 SEP V2 Tua. Honestly, it's pretty good as a tank. So let's go ahead and pin it there, and then let's go look at what the kind of cost comparison. Now you can't upgrade this thing at all, right? It is what it is, what it is. So right, so it's basically a SEP V2 with less health though, and no APS. So this is for me where I kind of have to think about this, because if you're in a position where you're scouting with this tank and you're using it as a scout, right? Well, it's going to be on its own somewhere, and it's going to be trying to provide vision, right? And for me, I realize that, again, on its own, if any ATGM comes after it, if a helicopter shoots at it, if any, T-15 or even a BTR-90, if they all outrange this thing, right? The range of the SEP V2 Tua is only 1,400 meters. So all ATGMs outrange it. So it's going to get one shot from cover, and then it has to back up because it's going to get, spotted after it shoots, even if it does get that ambush shot. So you are playing a high micro game. And in one of the games that I played, I did see somebody actually use this pretty effectively, and they were able to do all the micro, right? They were able to kind of creep forward, be in stealth, take the shot, back up, and they weren't being hit. But you're spending a lot of micro attacks on one unit that, again, is 300 points, and again, it's not bad. I think the best use for it is if you were going to send a bunch of tanks on their own. Like if I was going to have, my SEP V2s and SEP V3s go on a flank with some kind of SHORAD, I would bring this with them so that they had vision. But now that's not really the play style that I have for the deck, because I'm going to get to an objective and I'm going to lock it down, and my scouting is done with cheap things like the scouts and the M981 Fist V. They're doing my recon of the perimeter, but if I had a different deck where I was having a kind of forward mobile force of Abrams that were behind enemy lines or something, that I needed some powerful scouting that was also a tank, sure, SEP V2 does it. Again, and it fits into that formula of, I wouldn't want an RV Javelin in there because it's going to be shooting a Javelin, and there's no other rocket to go with the Javelin, so it's basically just going to be for naught. So in that environment, I probably would bring this. So in my mind, this is just for a different deck, right? If I'm playing with a different play style that's not a steel wall type of defensive line play style, I probably would bring this, but that is not for this deck. All right, thanks, guys. Moving on to Infantry, I think, now. So let's go to the Infantry tab. Infantry tab, I think, is one in this deck that you have to leverage it very well, and it is a make or break for me on this deck. I mean, obviously, tanks are powerful, and you can just, again, get a blob of tanks and roll them around, but the problem is, as soon as those tanks die, or if they're very critically damaged, and I have plenty of examples of that where I just finish an engagement with my tanks and all of my tanks are at half health, right? And thankfully, hey, I didn't lose any of them, but they're all at half health. They all have optics damaged, loaders damaged. They're all very damaged. And I have to bring them all back off the front line and repair them all. So when I am doing that, I need something to hold the line. And that's where your infantry come into play. Now, I think combat engineers in general get slept on pretty hard. I do not see a lot of people use them. Most of the US players that are running a Stryker deck or any type of infantry focused deck, they're always running everything but combat engineers. And then when they do want to bring an anti-infantry choice, well, they're bringing Delta Force, they're bringing like the Marine Raiders with CQC package. And hey, that totally makes sense. Those are very effective anti-infantry units that do a great job. But if you're not running Spec Ops or USMC, these guys, first of all, they're only 80 points, and they're a 9-man squad with 10 armor. So let's not forget that, right? They have a very durable kind of core, and I have had so much luck. My play style with this deck completely changed when I started in my opener bringing 1 or 2 combat engineers, to, like, just kind of depending on the map. If it's a very heavy forest map, I'll bring 2 with AMPVs. These guys are essential, and they're basically a better Bradley. And it kind of hurts me to say that, because the Bradley, I mean, as you may have known, I played a lot of Warno. Bradley was awesome in that game. It is not nearly as good in this one. So let's kind of look at that, right? So if you take the Bradley, and let's say you just kit this thing out with all the upgrades, right? So let's just give it all the upgrades, and then let's go ahead and compare it. I think, yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the ESV and the M2A3, let's just actually compare these two together real quick so we're getting an honest comparison. So between these two, they're the same. The nice part about the ESV Bradley is it has a different type of TOW 2 package, right? So the ESV Bradley has, okay, so the primary difference is you only get the HE, but then with the regular Bradley, you get the kind of anti-tank version. HE, I love it. That's why also, too, if you look at my other tabs, we'll get to that, but I love the TOW systems that come with both rockets, because you can shoot at infantry or you can shoot at tanks. When you're looking at the specialized Bradleys, they're one or the other, right? You're either going to get anti-tank or you're going to get an HE version. So you don't really get the power of both. It's one or the other. So let's now look at the AMPV, and I'll explain to you why I like it so much. So let's look at the stats, right? The Bradley technically has 1 more health. AMPV can carry twice as many troops, so it's twice as cost efficient. And also, if you want to bring like Mech Rifleman AA, these guys are a group of 6. You can bring 2 of them with 1 AMPV. At the same time, again, remember, you don't have any helicopters with this deck, so you have to be very intentional when you want to bring out your infantry and be as cost effective as possible. So now, we look at the Bushmaster. It's the same gun. Bradley does have a little better optics. The speed is the same. APS and smoke is the same. Health and armor is the same. So one of the things that I noticed is that even though, and this is actually kind of odd to me, even though their health and armor stats are the same, this AMPV wins out in a 1v1 trade with the Bradley. And technically, from what I'm seeing now, it shouldn't, because, yeah, the stats for all the Bradleys are the same. But I'm not lying to you. When these things, I probably can show you a clip here when they go head-to-head, the AMPV kind of comes out on top. Now, one of the other things I do like about this is it has a Javelin missile, and this Javelin allows it to do massive damage when it gets through, versus the, like the TOW system that is not as powerful as the Javelin. Even though with the Javelin it's less ammo and the range is shorter. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about this AMPV versus Bradley a dispute. Obviously, you're paying 25 more for the AMPV, but I tend to just feel like in practical application, it works for me way more effectively than the Bradley does, even though the Bradley is cheaper. So something to consider. But yeah, so combat engineers, super important. I'll bring them in one of these transports at the beginning of the game, and I'll try to have 2 of these transports out. So I'll have so again, when you think of stacking and layering, all of your types of attacks. I'll have a Stryker RV, I'll have a Cav Scout or two, I'll have an AMPV. That's a lot of rockets all hitting something that might be exposed. And of course, you're going to have to deal with smoke. But that's why, again, you have a lot of different ways of hitting that and getting through the APS. So the Mech Rifleman AA, these guys are absolutely clutch. You kind of want them everywhere. They're not very expensive. Only at 65. It's, you know, obviously a pretty small squad at size at 6. But I like them over the Trooper AA because the Trooper AA, it's a 9-man squad, but you're really paying for all the extra anti-infantry damage and the machine gun. I don't need that with this deck. I just need a lot of SHORAD because when an enemy realizes that, hey, there's this tank front wall, their first reaction is, well, let's bring in some choppers and see if we can pick away at these tanks. The Mech Rifleman AA are, again, the guys I kind of leave behind. I spread them all over wherever I'm at, and they are there to deter any helicopter attacks that kind of come at me. Now, the troopers. These guys initially, I didn't really value them that much. So I'm like, well, they have 2 javelins, only 2, and they have 3 AT4s, which I'm not a huge fan of. But, so I really didn't use them in my first kind of go through with this deck. But once I started to kind of see the light, and our tournament was a big part of that, I saw one of our players very effectively use troopers in quantities. And again, when you have 2 or 3 troopers out, well, now all of a sudden this volume of fire with the javelins makes a lot more sense. So I do bring, with the combat engineers, kind of depending on the map. If it's very forested, I'll just bring, you know, 1 or 2 combat engineers. If it's mixed, I'll bring 1 combat engineer, 1 trooper. And if it is, again, mostly open field, I'll bring just troopers. These guys, they're kind of a basic unit, and the problem is they only have 6 armor, so when they do get into a fight, they don't last very long. But that's okay. You know, I have tanks layered behind them. These guys are just there to kind of be the brunt of the attack, or stay behind while I'm going to go repair my tanks. And they're great frontline. They're not too expensive, and they do the job. They have a variety of munitions, mostly all 400 meters. You have to account for that. But they do accomplish that well. Now, this dragon. The dragon, I have it there if I need to bring troops to the front line, but I don't want to pay for this kind of chonky boy. And if I don't want to pay all of that, and if I need to get it there a little quicker, this thing is faster. So when I need something to get to the front line quick, I'll use the Dragoon. And you think, well, why don't you put, you know, the Javelin and all of this extra armor? That's not why I have this in the deck. I want this thing as a fast transport, because remember, no helicopters, so something has to be quick with this deck when you need it. So if I am in a firefight and my troopers are dying, or my mech, you know, or my AA is, you know, lacking and I need to bring more, I'll queue them up into the Dragoon and I'll just get them out there quick. That's exactly why I bring these. And then the mech engineers, I had extra points in the deck here, and I have noticed that sometimes, again, when you're just trying to be very cost effective, if I needed more engineers and I didn't want to pay for a full combat engineer squad, I'll bring the mech engineers. If you compare the 2 of them, you'll see that the mech engineers, they keep the SMAW-Ds and the shotguns, which I feel like is the main power of this close range infantry. And then of course they have their assault rifles. So one of the things that I do really like about these guys is these shotguns and these SMAW-Ds is a burst of damage. So usually when these SMAWs, when they run out, that's kind of when I want to send my combat engineers or mech engineers back, because this does a ton of damage. So I'm really bringing these mech engineers as a 30-point less, you know, 50 versus 80. Kind of, again, adding volume of fire with the SMAW-Ds. Don't sleep on this. These SMAW-Ds, you can hit a vehicle with these, especially like something light-skinned, get it on the side, and you can 2-tap, you know, these BTRs or BRDMs or, you know, any of these lighter-skinned type of transports that are very powerful, but these SMAW-Ds can actually very much take them out. Or you just blast infantry with them, and they do a great job. So that's really my infantry deck. it really is the front line kind of force with this kind of ground armor steel wall, and I didn't value them, and I highly encourage you guys to definitely open with infantry. Majority of that 1,000 points, you know, you're going to spend 200 or so points on recon, and 250 points on recon, and then you're going to want to spend about 400 points here to get your infantry out on the field to give you, you know, that aggressive take and hold type of infantry line. Okay, cool. So let's look at the vehicle tab. So obviously this is the most fun part of this tab, and I do see a lot of people in here comments saying that, well, vehicles are so boring, you know, it's so OP, you just rush in, you kill everything, and, you know, I'm bored. Okay, well, sure, you can have that play style, but then you're highly reliant on so many other people on your team doing so many other things. Kind of that same argument that you get with the artillery guys that, oh yeah, RD is so overpowered, you know, my KD is, you know, infinite at the end of the game. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but when your KD is like all kills and you have no deaths, you get a star for your KD. Well, sure, you can be an artillery player and do that, but I don't feel like that's the best way to play this deck, right? I'm trying to fill a role, and I'm trying to fill it completely. So when I'm looking at my tanks, I'm trying to think, again, early game, mid game, end game. What are my actual like phases of deployment here? Because I tried it. Again, my first round was my opener was some recon, right? And then Sep 3, Sep 2, Abrams, Bookers. You know, I was just like dumping this whole tab out. And again, you can do that, but as soon as you take some losses or you got to retreat and repair, your front line is non-existent anymore. So let's start looking at these, right? I do know that the vehicle tab, again, you guys might know a lot of these tanks already, but we'll run through them really quick. So the Sep V3 trophy, I think the most important thing to notice here is just these key stats. So you have front armor, you have the white armor, which is armor against other cannons, right? Just think about it. You have cannon armor, and this is like the most layman basic term way I can think about it, but this is if you're fighting against something else that has a cannon, and this is if you're fighting something else that has a missile. So that's these kind of two different types of armor and what they protect against. So when you're looking at these armaments here, like the weapons, you'll see, okay, this white matches white, orange matches orange. So when you're looking at tanks and you want to kind of understand their tank stats, you want to look at, this is their pen, this is their pen for both types of damage. And as you see, okay, this thing is doing 6 damage at 525 pen, but if it's fighting against itself, it's not going to do the maximum amount of damage because its pen doesn't exceed the pen of, again, itself if they were in a head-to-head. And the Armata is the same thing, or the tanks on the Russian side, they have this same higher than pen amount of armor in the front. So Sep V3 trophy, very amazing tank. As you can see, it has the most armor out of any tank on the US deck. It has, as far as its main gun is concerned, it has the most amount of damage, only by a little, but also the key point here, Sep V3 has HE rounds. Now these HE rounds, they are designed to hit and damage any enemy infantry inside of buildings, and they do that very well. Of course, with 12 damage, you're doing more than if you were to just fire a heat round, right, which has 9 damage. So that's really, besides the armor, that's really the extra that you're getting out of the Sep V3. I do appreciate that they made this thing cheaper at 385 versus 350. Because again, the amount of difference between the Sep 3 and the Sep 2 isn't much. It does, again, slightly more armor, right, than its Sep V3, but same amount of health. Okay, you could say optics on the Sep V3 is better, which is also nice. But for these 35 points, what you're really getting is a little better optics, a little better armor, and you're getting this HE round. And again, I wouldn't sleep on the HE round. That's a big part of this unit's power. In an urban environment, is being able to get those HE rounds off. Now, I would say is if you're fighting at max range, if you're in this open field environment, the Sep V2 can probably do the job just as well as the Sep V3. You know, but again, I'm kind of looking at it, well, for only 35 points more, I feel like I'm getting a lot more flexibility out of what the tank can do. So I try to call out the SEP V3s first, and then after I have my 2 SEP V3s, I can bring out SEP V2s. Now, one other thing I'm sure you're going to notice is I do not do the whole like M1A2 Abrams stack. I have a variety of tanks, and that's because I want to cover a variety of situations. Right? I haven't turned this deck into a niche deck that is just for one situation. I think that is a smart thing to do. Say, hey, I have this deck that does this one thing for this one map in this one flag. Hey, I think eventually we play this game long enough, we're all going to be there, where we have decks for certain sides of maps. And I mean, that's the most sweaty sweatlord thing that we could ever do. I think eventually we're all going to be in that type of situation. But for now, I want a variety of tanks so that I can cover a variety of situations. That's generally easier to kind of play around. So I have 2 M1A2 Abrams. Now at 245 points, you're basically paying for an armored cannon. Our armor is lower with this tank, and it has no APS. So I'm not using this as a frontline brawler. This is a fire support tank. Like let's say for example, I have my SEP V3s out, but they are throwing a lot of armor at me. But I have my troopers, I have my combat engineers that I already brought out onto the field, but I just need more gun. But I don't necessarily want to pay the 350 for SEP V2s or 385 for the SEP V3s. I have 2 tanks out. I need 2 more. The Abrams does that very well. Again, they do have health. They do have armor. So if I need to swap the SEP V2s out, the SEP V2s have taken a couple hits, I need something else to be frontline, I'll move the M12 Abrams forward. I'll move the SEP V2s back. And now we have these, 4 tanks together that can do a very effective amount of damage on the front line, because again, you're just adding to your health pool and you're adding to your cannon count. So they're very great as a filler tank, but I do not bring these out on their own. They are not durable enough on their own to be valuable. I notice if I just bring 2 Abrams out, because I did that before, I'd bring 2 Bookers and then I'd bring 2 Abrams. That 4 tank combo crumbles way too fast. So you end up having to just, after a couple of shots, this thing is already going back to repair. Whereas your SEP V2s and SEP V3s will be able to hold that front line a lot longer than just the Abrams. I always bring the Abrams after I have a couple of my SEP V2s out or my SEP V3s out. So let's look at the Bookers. I love the Bookers. Bookers do Bookers things. These things shoot down helicopters all the time with their 50mm cannon. I do not think there will ever be a use case for me where I bring this with the 105. I'm not joking. The 50mm for this tank chassis is so versatile because of the fact that this thing, is quick enough to get around and flank. That's primarily how I use it. It does plenty of damage to infantry. It does do damage to the sides of tanks. I have plenty of footage where I use this thing as a flanking tank with my SEP V3s or SEP V2s engaging in head-to-head, and then I'll wrap these Bookers up around the side, and then now the enemy has to choose. Am I going to get side-banged by the Bookers, or do I want to get side-banged by the SEP V2s, right? Kind of up to them at that point. But it's a great tank to pose that problem to the enemy. Now, my opener, like I said, very, very much my opener for the game is a couple scouts, a couple cav scouts, something like that. Combat engineers, right? Or maybe troopers, bring some mech AA in there. My first 2 tanks, just about always, are my Bookers. They're 190. They have APS, right? And they have smoke. And again, this cannon is very versatile. And I try to keep them hidden. So if someone's rushing me with like a T-72 or a couple of T-72s, I try to keep the Bookers in a position where they can flank that enemy who's like, oh look, 1 troopers, I'm just going to run up on him. Well, these Bookers are there to actually give your very opener some good meat, right? That you can do a lot with these 2 tanks. And again, for 190, they're not breaking your opener. with the cost. Whereas if you were to try to bring a couple of SEP V2s out, well, shoot, that's 700 points. You're basically your Recon and your SEP V2, and that's it. Like, and again, I feel like that is way too all in, and you don't have enough units to actually create a front line with an opener like that. So let's talk about this little guy. Now, I do have the Stryker deck pairing. I can bring this, which arguably is a just straight up better version of this. And of course, the Stryker ATGM, you can upgrade it to the overfly attack. You can give it Strat and Trophy. That makes it a lot more expensive. So my main goal with bringing this, and we'll get to the meme ship here in a second. My main goal with bringing this little guy was that, again, I am layering a lot of rockets with this, and I am kind of creating a separate type of damage. And these guys, again, as a defensive line, I put them up high somewhere. I give them as much line of sight as I possibly can. And these things are basically just snipers from long range. I stack them with the RV Javelin, and I stack them also with a battleship. Now, the battleship, I went for the TOW 2 anti-tank missile, 1600 meter range and 1600 meter range. These guys can also hit buildings, so if I have SEP V3s or SEP V2s trying to push into an enemy's objective with units and high rises and buildings, I can have these two guys actually far back shooting these HE rockets at the buildings and doing a ton of damage with those missiles. Now, the problem with these versus, like, let's say a Stryker ATGM, and even if you do go kind of cheap with this and you don't bring any armor, and you bring the 2A, which still has the HE rockets on it, you know, this thing does get one smoke, which for 20 points, you're basically paying for the smoke and the fact that it's a little faster. This deck is the antithesis of speed, so when I was looking at these right out the rip, I was like, well, I don't need the speed, so I'll go with the cheaper 50.1. Your income tax on this is only 3. So it's like, it's a super cheap option, but yes, with no smoke, this thing is extremely vulnerable. And I have lost more of these than I can count. But like I said, I do appreciate what this thing can do as like a cornerstone to a defensive line. Again, you can have them really far back behind your tanks, just throwing missile after missile after missile at an enemy, and eventually they'll get through. And I say, if you keep one of these with a battleship, that's 3 TOW 2As flying at someone. Again, 2 of those 3 are going to get through, and that damage adds up. So this is my tank tab. I love that, again, you have plenty of options. You have the Bookers, you have the Abrams to layer, you have these SEP V2s and SEP V3s that are the main 4 tanks that are going to be doing all of your pushing and getting kind of the job done. The M1A2 adds 2 cheap cannons to your, other 2 tanks. Your Bookers for flanking and dealing a lot of damage to infantry. M901 can do both, and Battleship, I mean, let's be real, it's for the memes, but we're going to have some fun here, okay? Alright, so the support deck. Now, arguably, I think this deck is where most people live when they build out Stryker and Armored. I don't think I can even count how many folks that I talk to about Stryker Armored, and they're like, oh yeah, the Arty deck. Oh, I love that. Oh yeah, I build all Arty. I have HIMARS, I have Paladin, I have the GMLRS, I have the MLRS, I have the other Paladin, and that's just, I kind of just use those all game. Okay, cool. Like that, like I said, that's a totally viable strategy. You can just literally fill this entire, 7 slots with all of the Arty in the game. You know who you are, Guns. And, you can just play, or Kurhi, or you guys can just play that the whole game and, have an infinite KD and just be an absolute Chad. Sure, thank you very much. But for all the rest of us that either want to go into a public game or want to have a complementary support tab to the rest of our units, I feel like this is the most balanced version of a support tab. Right, so let's start out with the HIMARS. Now, we do have access to the GMLRS and the MLRS, right? The main difference between these two being the GMLRS has a tighter dispersion. One is 260 and one is 250, or sorry, well, this one is 300. 250 is the cost. So one's 300 and one's 260, right? So the GMLRS, it has a longer range and the dispersion is tighter. And I believe they can bring the same kind of cluster warheads. Absolutely. So if I'm only going to bring one of these, I'm definitely going to go with the one that has the tighter amount of dispersion. You guys, please value this. Having your rockets land in a smaller cluster means that you're more accurate wherever you're shooting, and that helps you actually hit the target. How many times you call in an artillery strike and the spread is so bad you don't even kill what you're shooting at because it's just all over the place. So if I did bring it, I would bring the GMLRS. But if we're going to compare kind of these two together with the GMLRS and the HIMARS, now let's look. There, you know, the HIMARS is 80 points less. Sure, you're getting half the amount of missiles, but the dispersion is the same. Key point here: they're just as accurate, and the HIMARS has just as much range. So for me, that's where I'm at with these two. Is I want the range and I want the dispersion. I'm getting half the missiles, but I don't fire all 12 at something unless there's like, you know, a team's stack of T-14s like in a circle. I'm not firing all 12. And just one other point here too, the kind of the tip with any artillery player is, again, you've all been on the receiving end of artillery. You sometimes you can see it as it's flying towards you, and you can kind of guess, oh my gosh, I think they're shooting at my whatever blob of stuff, and you immediately start moving them, right? So your damage window is very small when the artillery actually starts landing. So what I do is I bring these out in pairs, and I do a half barrage on one target, and I'll be shooting 6 missiles, but in a 3 missile volley from 2 trucks. That way I'm getting those 6 missiles, I'm getting them out there twice as fast and much more likely to actually kill what I'm shooting at versus just damaging it as they panic and run away, and then half of my rockets are just hitting the ground. So that's why I like the HIMARS, because it's cost impact. I'm only 440 points versus 600, right, from bringing out 2 of the MLRS. I think if I was going to just be the Arty Chad deck, I would bring the GMLRS because you just get more shots. You can, you know, shoot 6 over here and 6 over there, you know, with 2 of them. You get twice as many volleys before you have to go reload. But again, for me, with more of a, you know, situational attack, I really like what the HIMARS does. Again, it's accurate and it's long range. So let's look at the Paladin. Okay, you're probably thinking to yourself, why isn't this the Iron Thunder? Bruh. Okay, actually, can I compare it against itself? I don't think so. So when we're looking at this Paladin, this thing, it comes with some precision, some amount of precision Excaliburs, smoke, and HE. So this is a well-rounded package. Versus you look at the Iron Thunder, and this thing is only the precision. Now it does have extra range, right? 700 more range, which is nice, but the dispersion is actually worse. Let's look at that. So right here we have 180 dispersion, which means that maximum range. What's the distance between the two ends of the dispersion circle? So this is 180 meters. The Iron Thunder, and 120 for its precise munition. The Iron Thunder is 150. Now this could be that that's just the natural dispersion of this Excalibur round from 4,300 to 5,000. But again, I think about it like if I'm shooting this thing, I'm probably going to be shooting it at max range or close to it. But just consider that. This thing's dispersion on paper is worse than the Paladin. But the damage is the same. You're not getting a more powerful round, right? And you're actually getting less overall ammo than the Paladin, right? You have 24 HE, 6 Excalibur. This thing is just 23 Excalibur. So I try to look at it that way. And again, having smoke is super important in this game. if I'm trying to assault a position and I don't really know what's there, or if I know that, you know, there's 50 ATGMs on a tree line, I'll just smoke the tree line and move along my merry way. So having this as a smoke option, because if you see that I don't have any other smoke option in my deck, is super important, right? It's very important to have these smoke barrage available. And if you guys have ever actually shot a 155 smoke, it is a massive pile of smoke. I mean, one smoke round from this thing creates a large smoke field. So I love having all three of these munitions versus just having one of the kind of longer range type. And I am primarily using this to attack infantry in buildings. Again, with a heavy armored deck like this, one of your main threats are those, you know, ATGM teams like the Cornets and the Cat teams. Those are kind of your bane, and they just very annoying. And usually tanks take a long time to chew through them. These do not. You have three of these. They're blamming down whatever's in a building pretty effectively. So I love them for that. And that's really all the artillery I bring. And between the two of these, you've kind of covered all your bases. You have your anti-tank, anti-other artillery, you know, anti-tank blob with the HIMARS, and then your paladin is just killing all the infantry scattered throughout the buildings. Now your pack 3 MSC, arguably the best pack in the game. Definitely want to have it. Fortunately for me, a lot of my teammates brought packs as well, so I didn't always have this out, but it was so nice to have this pack 3 as an option, especially if I notice the enemy team is, you know, spamming a lot of cruise missiles. This is great to have to kind of be a counter for heavy planes, heavy cruise missiles. And then, I mean, this one's pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, pack 3, it's amazing. You get 12 missiles. It has multi-target. I would never go with the 8 missiles or the 4 missiles, because when you go to the 8 missiles, you lose your 2 missiles per target, right? When you go down to 8, and then when you go down to 4, you lose one of your multi-targets as well. So I basically always bring this thing with 12. Centurion C-Ram. Okay, this thing is so great and has such a multi-purpose effect to it. I have videos of this thing killing choppers. I have videos of this thing killing infantry. And of course, it's there primarily to shoot down cruise missiles. So when you are playing a defensive frontline deck, the enemy team is most likely at one point going to realize that, okay, I'm not having a very good time going head first into this deck. So let's either hit it with artillery, hit it with cruise missiles, something to dislodge this guy's position. Well, the C-Rams completely shut that down. If you have 2 of these, you can shoot down just about every cruise missile that comes at you, unless they stack like 12 or 15 cruise missiles from multiple different cruise missile options all at the same time. It's very unlikely that, you know, any cruise missiles are going to get through. So, for example, if you have someone that has like an Iskander or a B-52 that has to fire them one after the other, this thing will eat all of those up. Or 2 of these will eat up all the cruise missiles, and not even one will get through. So I love it for that. And then also, again, it can kill helicopters, and it can also shoot infantry and suppress infantry very well. Again, with the range that this thing has at 1,000, you can shoot infantry with it, outrange it, and suppress it very quickly. Wonderful all-around type of AA piece that, again, is very cost-effective. The truck. So if you guys saw my last video, you noticed I was talking about, you know, hey, in a different deck, I'm probably going to try the truck. Well, this is the deck, and I got to tell you, the Sidewinder missiles, they are amazing. I mean, so let's look at it. This thing only costs 170 points, right? And you're getting 15 rockets, and they can intercept missiles, they can hit helicopters, and they can kill jets. This thing can literally do it all. And with its radar on, you know, it's getting 2 times high altitude range, which is about 3,000 meters, and 1.25 times low altitude range, which is about, 2,500 meters or so. So this thing can outrange all the choppers in the game. It can outrange all of the different types of seed missiles that come at it. It has a very good opportunity and ability to intercept seed missiles. It can multi-target 2 targets, so that means it can shoot 2 seed missiles at the same time. It doesn't have to just try to shoot them down one at a time. And it actually does a really great job. This is one of those that, okay, so for example, if I have somebody on my team that's bringing the Pack 3, right, and I don't need to bring a long-range Pack 3, well, then I'm just going to bring probably 1 or 2 MMLs and 1 or 2 CRAMs, and that's all the, like, big-time, heavy-hitting, punchy AA that I need. These things do plenty of work, and I have been consistently impressed with how well this thing will just shoot down helicopters over and over and over again. Because that's the biggest bane for your deck is helicopters. So, and as you know, if you bring a Patriot Pack 3, you're not going to have any anti-helicopter with that. You need something else. Alright, so all in all, I love the MML AIM-9. It does a great job at exactly what I needed to do, which is shoot down all the annoying choppers that are just sick and tired of my tank push, and I'm totally a believer. I wouldn't change it. I'm totally a believer of the AIM-9. So you're probably thinking, oh my god, why does he not have the Stryker SHORAD? That's crazy. That was like his favorite unit, and he just wanted more of those. Alright. The primary thing that I loved about the Stryker SHORAD was because it has a multi-role type of effect, right? It has these Hellfire missiles and the Stingers and the 30 mil. So it can do a lot with the, trophy APS system. It can go toe-to-toe against the helicopter and survive. It's fast. It does so many things really well. Now the thing is, I don't need the Javelins or the Hellfires that this thing comes with, right? I already have so much of that in my deck all the time with the AMPVs, the M901s, the Stryker RVs. I'm kind of covered on that, multi-role type of extra amount of missiles, volume of fire. I really already have that, and I just need a dedicated AA piece. And again, with this thing having 15 rockets, and I have other AA in front of it. Obviously, if this thing is kind of the front of the AA, well, it's going to get destroyed because one missile thrown back at it and it's dead. So I'll have a CRAM in the front. I'll have the Mech Rifleman AA in the front, because I'm not playing a mobile type of deck where I'm moving constantly, where I need a Stryker SHORAD to be moving with my attack all the time on the flanks, attacking a point, whatever. I'm a lot more stationary with this deck. So the MML9 finds a nice little tree line to sit in, and then it's just adding damage to whatever I'm shooting. So paying the 240 points for the Stryker SHORAD, I'm not getting all the value out of what the SHORAD does, and I really don't need it. And I will say, one of the things with this deck that you run into is you wish you had more support, like, slots. I mean, only having 7, I felt super constrained. Okay, how do I only make 7 work? And we're going to get into the supplies here in a second. So as you know, not having supply helicopters, you have to look at logistics in a whole different way. And I will say, if you are on a coordinated team in Discord, ask for supplies. Ask a guy to bring in an Osprey with 6,500 of supplies, tell him where to put it, and that'll make your life a lot easier. But if you don't, if you haven't joined our Discord and you're not playing with a group yet, then you have to consider your supplies totally on your own, and this deck eats supplies like crazy. Tanks cost a lot of supplies to repair, and you need to have a lot of them kind of spread out all over the place. So what I end up doing, and this thing is such a joke, by the way, it's so slow, but it is what it is. So what I end up doing is I end up bringing a big stack of supplies, 15,000. I bring them, I drop them somewhere safe in the back, and then I sell this thing. So I just have it drop it off and I sell it, and then I'll bring in one of these to actually move those supplies around. I'll have them move them up to the front line. I'll create little supply piles where my infantry are hiding, where my tanks are kind of laid out, where my artillery is, and that's how I use this. I'll bring out a big stack of supplies, and then I'll move it around with this one and just kind of go from place to place. And that's so the reason why I bring 4 of these is because, yes, I might have 2 of these out at a time, and of course if they die, you need to replace them. So that's where I get having 2 of these, and or sorry, 4 of these, and I have 2 of these because if one is coming out with supplies and again it dies, or I need another one, you know how the rule goes, 1 is none, 2 is 1. So I definitely have both of these supply transports. Initially, when I first kind of made this deck, I only had just the PLS, and I've ran into a huge problem with that because yes, you have this massive supply dump that you're constantly moving, and again, one stray artillery shot, and if you lose, 12,000 supplies, you're hurting pretty bad, and I'm sure you guys have all been there. So one big safe dump somewhere, and then move it around in 5,000 stacks at a time. There's a whole lot in this tab I didn't bring, right? So the HEMT, I don't need the troop transport. The mortar system, again, remember, we are limited on slots. So if we're going to be putting something else in here, it has to do that role and be so critical at that role that it's replacing something vital, right? So think about this. I have 2 arty, 3 AA, 2 supplies, right? So that's my segment of units. So I have to somehow, so when I'm looking at, okay, a mortar piece, well, it's replacing something out of this arty tab. I have smoke, I have HE, and I have precision. This isn't going to replace that for me. So the other artillery piece, I think in a perfect world, so if I was going with a dedicated team that somebody else was going to bring the pack 3, my first change to this deck I would remove the pack 3 and I would bring this. Why? Because of that. Cluster artillery rounds are more important than you guys realize, and I'm sure you've been hit by these cluster artillery shots. They don't seem very powerful. I mean, when they're hitting, they're kind of these little puffs of whatever. But the range I don't think is as far. Yeah, so it's a closer range artillery. The dispersion is greater, but having cluster munitions is extremely powerful. And ideally, if you wanted to, again, lean a little bit more into what this deck can do and the role that it provides, like I said, I would take the pack 3s out and I would put these paladins in, and I would probably put all 3 of them in because you're getting a ton of firepower out of these cluster rounds. And again, they have a more accurate kind of precision version of the cluster rounds too, but even though you only get 3. So this is, again, a close contender for that spot. But since I have to be self-sufficient and I want to play this deck in a balanced way that, again, anybody can pick it up and use it, I decided I would rather have this, which can do damage to tanks, right, versus this that can't do damage to infantry and buildings. So this, primarily for infantry and buildings, that's its main use case. And I have the cluster HIMARS, right? That can definitely deal with any tank blob. It just has a long aim time. So let's look at the MCV again. I don't need a mortar. A mortar is not stronger to me or a better option than these. I already have smoke, so I don't need the mortar. Pivads, Centurion, I think is just better, even though this thing, you can give it cage armor and smoke. And sure, it has a smoke. You can probably survive a seed missile hit. I just like the Centurion. I'm on the Centurion train right now. So MLRS, GMLRS, we kind of talked about this. You're spending a lot of extra points, and really the only thing you're getting out of it is just a larger volume of missiles. So if I were to bring one of these, it would replace the HIMARS, and I just don't want to spend all the extra points. I want my points more set aside for tanks. The HIMARS does what I need either of these to do. Definitely, key part of your deck is logistics. Linebacker, it's just a worse Shorad. If I'm going to bring one of these, I'm going to bring the Stryker Shorad. And as I said, I don't need that mobile, be all over the place type of kind of play style that the Stryker Shorad offers. I'm happy with my MML9 that kind of, again, finds a nice place to sit. So I just don't need the linebacker in this setup. If I didn't have access to Stryker, if I'm looking at a armored USMC deck. Trust me, when we get there, the linebacker will be there, but just not for this one. Pack 2 and Pack 3, I only have one slot for packs, and I believe that Pack 3 MSC is better because of the longer range. Right, the Pack 3 is a shorter range option, and even though it has more missiles with the 16, I don't like the fact that it's shorter range. So I go with this one. Another mortar carrier, don't need it. Stryker Shorad, we went over that, and Stryker SPH. I don't get you, man. I don't know why you exist, but that's okay. Anyway, support tab done. And oh, helicopter tab, psych. No helicopter tab. So air tab, okay. This is one of those things where it is, and I love that about this game, that the air tab is so flexible, because I have had probably like borderline heated discussions. I won't say argument, heated discussions with folks about why you bring the F-16 and how good it is. And I totally agree. I'm just going to say that. I totally agree with all you guys, all your arguments, all of our conversations about that. I totally agree. The F-16s are a good plane. They offer a ton of versatility, and they usually do the job that they're trying to do, right? Okay, but so why did I bring this big chunky boy? All right, so one of the big problems that this deck faces when it's trying to assault a position, like I said, mostly we're defending a position, but once you get into phase 2, right, you've built up your kind of wall in phase 1. Phase 2, you're trying to now push, right? You want to get those kills. You want to capture those objectives. You have, 4 to 6 tanks out. You have enough infantry. You have your AMPVs. You don't want to just sit around and twiddle your thumbs, right? You're not an artillery deck. You're a ground deck that, you push this steel wall kind of forward. So when you run into that town, and I know you've all have seen it, that has, 14 cat toe 2s in it, and you're like, oh my god, what the heck am I going to do with this? Say hello to B-52H. I have had so many great games with this thing. And again, a lot of folks are going to immediately start saying, oh, well, sir, actually, by the way, the cruise missile kind of sucks because it just gets intercepted by everything and dies, and none of them ever hit the target. I have literally had people come into my chat while I'm playing a game telling me cruise missiles are stupid, don't ever use them, they don't do anything. And I'm like, all right, sir, hold my beer, watch this. I don't even drink, but hold my proverbial beer and watch this, right? So I will say, okay, you don't think this works? Watch. And I'll bring this thing out, I'll fire off my cruise missiles, I'll bring my CJ in behind it, so I have seed missiles going out, and I have cruise missiles going out, and guess what? They get through, and they do big damage. And then what does that person do? Oh, well, okay, I'm not saying I didn't mean they never work. I just mean, against a high ELO team, against a 4,000 ELO team with an IQ of 200, it won't work. Okay, bro. You know who you are. No, cruise missiles are really good, guys. And the reason why they're very good is because when you have an enemy that's very front line cat team or Conquer's team, that's the front line of their force. They usually don't have anything in front of that. And if they do, okay, you deal with that. But if you have a guy that has just a whole bunch of cat teams in high-rise buildings, you're going to use these B-52s so you're going to use the B-52 and the cruise missiles to dislodge all of that infantry. The point is that you're not just calling these things out and firing it randomly, right? The point is that you have your tanks ready to push into this objective, but they're stopped because of all of these, teams of ATGMs in buildings. So you're going to fire this and bring your seed plane missile behind it, so that as these cruise missiles are flying, your seed plane comes in, shoots seed missiles, right, which are either, again, now the AA piece has to make a choice. Am I going to intercept the cruise missiles, or am I going to save myself, right? And these cruise missiles are going to land. Again, they would have to have a CRAM up or something like it, right? They'd have to have a missile intercepting unit up at the front line. And And if they do that, you can have one of your tanks pop out, hopefully, and shoot the thing and punish him for doing that, right? I do understand. You don't always get the cruise missiles through, and sure, you fire 12, maybe 4 of them hit, maybe 5 of them hit. But that's usually enough. And I'll also stack them. So if I want to, let's say there's, a bunch of targets, I'll put 2 on each target in case, one of them doesn't get through, one of them hopefully does, right? This thing is, I'm telling you, it's really good for that because it also allows you to support your team from range. If somebody else is attacking an objective and they need help because there's a lot of, static infantry or there's a tank blob or something, you can use this to help your team across the map, right? And it gives you that flexible option to do a lot of damage to a specific area of the map or dislodge the enemy that's at a specific area of the map. It does that role very well, and I think this is a core component to making this deck not feel so sluggish and slow, because it is a very slow deck. You have no options for airdropping anything, right? No helicopters and no airdroppable assets. So you have to give yourself some kind of flexibility, or at least I do, with tools to engage enemies at long range, right? So I kind of already went over why I picked the CJ out of all the 3 F-16s. I picked the CJ because even though it's a seed plane, I do have some ASF capability. I can shoot down a couple helicopters. I have the ability to engage jets, right? But primarily I'm bringing this thing out when I'm bringing the B-52 out. Again, it's 1,000 points. It's a lot to save up for. And I usually don't have 1,000 points to spend. But if I know I'm going to be needing it, if I know, again, I just went from phase 1 into phase 2. I'm getting ready to push. I'll start saving. And it might take me 4 minutes or 5 minutes to get, probably 5 minutes. It's probably going to take me, actually might even be 6 minutes. It might take me 5 or 6 minutes to get the 1,000 points that I need to deploy both of these together. But the impact of, again, 4 seed missiles helping cover your cruise and the 12 cruise missiles is awesome. I definitely think this is a very worthwhile combination of jets to accomplish the goal that they need to, which is dislodge a heavily entrenched enemy. So that's the air tab. I'd love to hear what you guys think. I think this deck, out of all of them, I hope that I'm taking a very niche perspective. Not niche because it has a very limited use case, but I hope I'm taking a very niche perspective of this deck because I know how people play this deck, and it's just right here. It's, oh yeah, I'm going to bring 7 arty pieces, and sure, I'll put other stuff in here, but I'm never going to use it because who cares? Again, I think this is the steel wall of your team. And as you guys all know, if there's that one objective that is the key point in the map that you need a strong defensive line, man, you got it with everything that this deck has. You have combat engineers, chunky infantry. You bring 2 of them together. You can even add a mech engineer with them, so you have a 3 stack of just shotgun maniacs. You have your mech rifleman AA. You have your Centurion and your MML9 for a SHORAD. Troopers to just hold the line, absorb some damage. Your big tank core that can cover any type of tank situation, right? You have a variety of damage with cannons and ATGMs from your AMVPs, your Stryker RVs, your battleship, your M901, and you have the arty that you need to counter, again, clusters of tanks, AA pieces. You have this to hit infantry and buildings. You have your pack 3 if you need it. You got plenty of supplies. This deck definitely is something that can hold the line in just about every situation. So thank you guys for being here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear you try this deck out and kind of tell me what you think. Please join the Discord. We have tournaments running weekly now that I am super excited to kind of set up and make, get some seasons going. I think that would be super fun. We constantly have lobbies going, and I'd love to see you guys in there. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to see you on the battlefield.